Good morning once again. I'm Father Aniset Pinto, and this is my channel Quo Vadis of YouTube. And today I want to talk about one of the passages in the Bible that is actually the most well known throughout the world. Everyone has heard of Prodigal Son and has some idea of what it might all be about. Today, particularly, I want to see it in the context of modern culture, entitlement, if you will, and also fatherhood. And so let's get right to the passage here and take a look at it. Let's see if we can begin right at the top. Now I will read it for you because the writing is kind of small. You'd have to increase the visibility, the screen, so that you can read it along with me. It's the parable of the prodigal and his brother. And so Jesus said, "And there was a man who had 2 sons. And the younger of them said to his father, 'Father, give me the share of the property that falls to me.' And he divided his living between them. Now many days later, the younger son gathered all he had and took his journey into a far country, and there he squandered his property in loose living." So let's start with that. A man had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, "Give me the share of the property that falls to me." Imagine, it's as if he's saying to his father, "My inheritance, my patrimony, you are dead to me, Father. Give it to me now." And this kind of falls into the culture of what Jesus is talking about in his time. It never fell to a son before the father had passed away. It remained the father's to the day of his death. So here the younger son is saying already, "Father, give it to me now. You are dead to me. All that you have. You can no longer teach me. I no longer want to be here with you. I want my share of the property." And you can imagine here every sense of this this young man, the young son, who has now decided to remove himself from his father. And there's a sense here that there is a hate that has fallen onto him for his father. He doesn't want to be with him, doesn't want to see him. He considers him dead already. He wants all of that is coming to him now. And so often, though, and that's reading between the lines, because so often, if we just read the surface story, it doesn't give you all of that impact of what the words mean, of what the words might allude to with regard to the younger man and the father himself. The father must have been just amazed at what he was hearing, but he does love his son, and he gives it all to him. He gives him his future patrimony. So he gathers all his stuff and he takes a journey into a far country, and there he squandered his property on loose living. The younger son. Younger son didn't stay with the father. All he had built, all of his that the father had created for him, a sense of well-being, a sense of place, a sense of continuity, but rather he forgoes all of that. It's kind of a sense too of rejection of the father. And how much do we see that nowadays as well? We see that all the time. And it is interesting because it gives you a sense of where the son is, and it also kind of gives you a sense of how the father is now in some ways responding. He responds very fatherly. He does not berate his son, say no. He gives him what he wants. And at this point, he has decided to leave, and he goes to a far country, to a place. You can imagine, as a young man, where's all his friends? Well, he's left all his friends. He's left the place where he is. He's decided to just go away. And he squanders his property in loose living. So, a profligate living, type of, he spends it on the things that he likes and give him pleasure and give him satisfaction. And he just spends it all. He doesn't build with it. He doesn't construct with it. He squanders it. So, and when he had spent everything, a great famine arose in that country, and he began to be in want. All of a sudden, things turn on him. He no longer has the money. Famine arises. He is now hungry. Famine can be also a sense of the things are no longer there that he took satisfaction in. Famine, oftentimes we think it directly relates to food, and absolutely there's that meaning there. That's the primary meaning there. But also you can imagine that a place that becomes desolate has a famine of things as well. And he begins to be in want of things, particularly want of food. So he goes and he joins himself to one of the citizens of that country, and who sent him into a field to feed swine. This is an amazing thing here because for Jews at the time of Jesus, feeding swine is it is the lowest of the low. It would almost be better to do nothing, except that he is hungry and he wants to feed himself. So now he has to feed swine, pigs. The Jewish people did not like the pork, pigs. But here he is, he's feeding the swine. And it goes on. And he would gladly have fed on the pods that the swine ate. And no one gave him anything. But no one gave him anything. The pods, the very pods that the swine ate, probably things like husks of corn. I don't know if they had corn, but pods, other things that were there in the food. The swine usually we were given the table scraps, things that were not useful for the table, that were kind of half rotting, things that were cuttings of food, or the outward parts of food that weren't as palatable. And here he is. He's even thinking that even some of this might satisfy the hunger that he has, that he might even be able to feed on them. But no one gave him anything. He was told simply to feed the swine. And then he comes to himself. Now, I imagine people lose themselves in the things that they have. This is modern day culture. In modern day culture, they lose themselves in the things that they have, in the identity that they take on. And here the young man has decided he doesn't want to have any relationship with the Father, who has given him an identity as son of the Father and an ability to fulfill his sonship. He rejected all that, took all that was part of his patrimony, and he goes away. But he comes to himself, as if a light clicks on in his mind, thinking, no, I have lost something, but now I am finding myself again. He says, how many of my father's hired servants have enough bread and to spare, but I perish here with hunger? How many of my father's hired servants have bread enough and to spare, but I perish here with hunger? The Father always provided plenty, even to his servants. Provided plenty, certainly, to his sons. He loved his sons. And the younger one, when he asked, he gave him what he had as his patrimony. And the son took off. He wasn't sent away. He decided to go away. And so here he's coming to himself, recognizing how good he had it with his father, with all that the father had established. So often, the younger generation, they hate the rules, the constraints, and the conditions that someone who is a father puts upon them. But here, this one has now come to himself and recognizes how good he did have it. Recognition that he had lost everything. Even the pods that they fed the swine with, he was thinking about eating those. So what does he say to himself now that he's come to himself? I will arise and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. Now, if we read the surface of the top, we would almost think there's not a lot there that seems wrong. But now that it's kind of been brought out with regard to what the words indicate, we begin to see that it's not only a great evil that he has done against himself and against his father and against heaven itself, but he is coming to realize how he has done all of these things himself. Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants. That's important. This is really important because he sees that he was not a considerate son. He was not a good son to his father. He did not recognize the legacy, the patrimony, the inheritance he could have had with his father. Instead, he demanded the monetary value of it. He goes to a far country and he squanders it, does not build upon it, but loses it all in profligate living. And so he says, I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants. Because he recognized even the hired servants of his father have plenty and more. And he arose and came to his father. But while he was still at a distance, his father saw him in compassion and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, Bring quickly the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet. And bring the fatted calf and kill it. And let us eat and make merry. For this my son was dead and is alive again. he was lost and is found, and they began to make merry. Now, so often, one of the things in modern culture too is identification. This identity crisis that's in the modern world. Here, the Father and the Son could just as easily be a story about a mother and a daughter. It could just as easily be a story that has any one of us in it. In fact, we are to see ourselves as part of this story. But so often, in the sense of inclusion, words are changed, they lose meaning, they lose a kind of a foundation that is meant to be very biblical as well. And how often, by using inclusive language, so much is excluded. It's kind of weird, isn't it? But anyway, I just wanted to make that little note of an aside, if you will. For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And they began to make merry. His son was dead. Yes, just as the son considered the father dead to him, here the father thought, oh, my son is now dead. He's left me. There is no son here. My younger son is gone. He went his way and he was lost. He was as if he was dead. But now he's found and is alive. And they began to make merry because there's a return to life, to newness of life here. And this is very hopeful for those who feel very entitled. For this is a type of story of entitlement as well. Entitlement of the son who went to the father and said, I want my stuff now. You created it, you earned it, you built it up, but I want my stuff now. You are dead to me, give me my half. And he went off. Now his elder son was in the field, and he came and drew near to the house. He heard music and dancing, and he called one of the servants and asked what this meant. And he said to him, your brother has come, and your father has killed the fatted calf because he has received him safe and sound. And here we see now the story of the older brother, the elder son. And it's interesting because here he hears about what has happened with regard to his brother, and his father has made this a joyous occasion. But it continues, and this is where it turns. But he was angry and refused to go in. His father came out and entreated him. Father loves both the younger son and the older son. He thought his younger son was dead. He's now partying and enjoying this newness of having his younger son back. But the older one is really angry and refused to go in. He doesn't want to party. He doesn't like what has happened. Father came out and treated him. But he answered his father. This is the older son's words. Lo, these many years I have served you, and I have never disobeyed your command. Yet you never gave me a kid that I might make merry with my friends. This is important here, because here Jesus is speaking about how he is bringing back to the faith, those who were tax collectors and sinners, those who were, in a sense, prodigal sons who had gone out and lived their profligate ways and had sinned against heaven and against others. And he was bringing them back because Jesus is acting as the Father in heaven. And he wants to bring them all back into the fold. And the ones who were disgusted with Jesus and his being with tax collectors and sinners were the Pharisees. And here, Jesus is directing this particularly against the Pharisees. And here he is saying, your brother has come, and I have received him safe and sound. But here he's also saying that the older son, who answers, lo, these many years I have served you and never disobeyed your command, yet you never gave me a kid that I might make merry with my friends. So here is an interesting thing as well about the older son. The older son also has this hatred for his father, but he conforms to the rules. He's doing them out of obligation, not out of love. He is there in the community that his father had created and built. But look what he says. He says, you've never given me a kid that I might go and make merry with my friends. My friends. As if my friends are not part of this community of life, of patrimony that you have created, of estate, of everything around the Father. Certainly is not friendly with the Father in saying this. So now let's see how he goes on. But when this son of yours came, who has devoured your living with harlots, you killed for him the fatted calf. But when this son of yours came, the younger son, who has devoured your living with harlots, so he has lived a profligate life, wasting away his inheritance. But here the older son is adding that he did it with harlots. How does he know this? He is attributing even greater sins to the younger son than the sins that we have already named above, which were bad enough and horrifying sins. But he's attributing to him even more sins, to the younger son. And how often do we say that in the modern world, where someone who certainly would not be in the sense of sinless could never be sinless. Only God is sinless. And here, this older son is attributing to the younger one even more sins. And how often in this world do we see people do this as well? They conform to the rules of the society, not because they like it. In fact, they hate the rules of the society. And when someone, their neighbor, someone they know, has a difficulty in their life with some particular sin, they come and they point it out accusatory and saying, look at him. See what he says at the very beginning. But when this son of yours, not, oh, but when my brother came back, he doesn't consider him his brother. But when this son of yours, as if he's accusing the father of creating this son that he hadn't raised up in the sense of goodness, because look at what he did. He rejected you. He took the money and he spent it all. A lot of this is in modern day society as well. We see it even with people who are not related. This is a kind of a story of a very tight community, two brothers and a father, and the estate or that which was built. And so here we go. The final words he says, the father says, because he loves the older son, he says to him, "Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. It was fitting to make merry and be glad, for this is your brother was dead. For this your younger brother was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found." And this is important because redemption is the proper function of the church as well. To recognize the sinful ways of men and women and to bring them back into union with God. A recognition, of course, of the son, the younger son, as to his failings and that he needs to change. As he says earlier, I will go back to my father and say, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants. Treat me as one of your hired servants. Recognition of oneself in relationship to God, so important. And how often do we see that in today's society? And why attack always on fatherhood? Here the father has placed together a world, in a sense, for these two sons of his, a world of nurture and care, a place that has been built for them by the Father, where they could grow in knowledge and understanding of what is good, have plenty in their lives, and a place to enjoy it, a home. They need not leave their home. It is quite fascinating. And so here, that's the end of the this particular passage. So we'll remove that for a moment. But we want to take a look at interesting things that I showed yesterday as well. They are what's happening in today's society. So let's share another screen. And I know I showed it yesterday because I thought this was. You only need to see the title to be perfectly honest. Uh, here's the share here. Why must every Hollywood hero have a dead or deadbeat dad? Where did they learn their heroism from, if not from their dad, from their father? But why is every father shown to be reprehensible? And here's a little trope, they call it, but it's one that is so often used in Hollywood. I don't think they've shown a good father in years, maybe decades. Anyway, that's one. Let's take a look at another one, because I find these, like I say, I find them interesting, and they do tell us something about what is actually happening, especially in places where you wouldn't expect it. Yeah. See, here, this one's from the New York Post. And how Disney teaches contempt for dads. Walt Disney creates a huge legacy, patrimony that he passes on. And it becomes a huge company. And that company, all for the benefit of families. And for decades, it was like that. But it's all lost now. The last couple of decades, they have had a horrible contempt for dads. They have given dads such a raw deal, and it's a sad thing because it's not family oriented. Disney is not family oriented. I'm surprised that anyone actually looks at Disney anymore. Finally, one more trope that I found, which is kind of interesting, or more like a meme, I guess you would call it. And we'll end on that meme because I found it, even though it has a kind of a word that probably shouldn't be shared, but anyway. Let's see if we yeah, here it is. We'll share this one. You have what we call an irrational sense of entitlement. It won't kill you, but it will cause you to believe that you deserve shit for doing nothing. Yeah, it's a meme. It's a sad thing. It's entitlement. The age of entitlement is here. People think they deserve things for doing nothing, and they want to take it from others. Others who have built and created and established a place, a home for it, but it's dismembered, taken apart, deconstructed, destroyed. It's a sad thing. It happened with the young prodigal son. He did that with his father's legacy, with his father's, with the inheritance that he would have gotten after his father died. He took it and he destroyed it. And but he did come to himself again, and that's the hopeful thing. So that's it for today. I just wanted to really examine the prodigal son. A lot of people should examine these stories in the Bible and see what's happening behind the words, the undercurrent. Try to figure out an understanding of the time and place as well. People would go to, sons would go to their father in the Old Testament to receive the blessing of the father. That it was so important. We see it with Esau and Jacob. How that blessing was so important from the father. It's something to consider. The that sense of continuity, of goodness, to deconstruct goodness, say what is evil is good, A lot of the stories coming out of Hollywood certainly do that. Anyway, like I said, there is hope. The hope of a change of heart, of coming to yourself, recognizing your sonship or daughtership. These are stories that are, because it's the most widely known story, the Prodigal Son, it is a story any and everyone can understand and see themselves in. That's all for today. Many of God's blessings be with you. And as I said in many of my videos before, if you like it, please strike the like button. Please become a member of by subscribing. Subscribe and ring that bell so that you get notifications of future broadcasts. Thank you very much. Goodbye.